All right, hello and welcome. You've joined us with the Life in Sydney webinar series. This is the actual main presentation series, Life in Sydney. My name's Sean. I'm joined with my colleague Chris. We both work for the North America team here at the University of Sydney, but I understand that you guys could be coming from all over. While you're just joining us, if you'd like, you can let us know where you're coming from in the chat box. We have a colleague of ours monitoring that chat box and delivering us your questions.
Where's the chat box?
Oh, the chat box is just at the bottom of your screen. I don't know if you can see my mouse moving around, but it should be along the bottom there. If you'd like to just say hello and let us know where you're coming from, that would be great. That would be great. We'll just wait a couple more minutes while we get the rest of the attendees into the session.
Please know that this is part of a series. This is a very general presentation, but if you have an interest in more specific programs, have a look through the other webinars and see if there's something that's right for you. If there isn't, if there's a specific area that you're really interested in and we're not covering in this series, at the end of the presentation there'll be a list of contacts and you can get in touch with us and find out what you need to know. What about questions? What if they have questions, Sean? What should they have?
We'll do our best to try and answer them as we go through the presentation. If you've got a really specific question that you'd like a bit more information on that you don't think we'd be able to answer in a quick couple of sentences, you can always email us. It's international.recruitment@sydney.edu.au. My colleague Wendy will put that in the chat box in a little bit. Otherwise, there'll be a lengthy Q&A session at the end, so we'll be able to answer your questions at the end of the session.
Oh, we see we've got some folks in from Ghana. New York.
Welcome. Toronto. Welcome. All right. Again, we'll just wait another couple of minutes while we wait for the rest of the people, and we'll do our proper introduction and get on with the session.
We're just going to have a look. We've got a slight technical problem with an echo. If you are receiving an echo, can you just let us know in the box, the comment box, that there's an echo to see where we can find the problem and hopefully resolve it. A couple of folks coming in from Malaysia, Iran, California, India, all over the place.
All right. We've got a fair few of you guys in joining us at the moment. Thank you again for joining. We understand that this could be at a pretty difficult hour for you, coming from across the world. It's about 11:30 a.m. here in Sydney, Australia. It's a really nice sunny day. And I think that'll probably do it. We'll be able to go in and get started now.
Let's get going.
Okay, so why study at the University of Sydney? We're both actually alumni, so we made the decision to come here, so hopefully that was a good decision. But we're going to talk a little bit about ourselves, our experience at the University of Sydney in this presentation, also what you can expect to do and see around Sydney, what it's like to live in the city, where you can live and how to get around and things like that as well. So this is very much just a general overview. We will touch briefly on the admissions process, but we have a couple of other webinar sessions that you can attend for that information.
Well, the key question, Sean, is why would anyone study at the University of Sydney?
Great question, Chris. I think I'll start out just talking a little bit about my journey to the University of Sydney. I've just finished a Bachelor of Science with a major in marine biology. It's traditionally a 3-year program, but I decided to stay around for another year, a 4th year, and do an honours project, which is a full year of research. I grew up about 5 hours south of Sydney in a really regional, rural part of New South Wales in Australia. There weren't really a lot of universities or options to do tertiary study in my hometown, so I needed to move to study. I was looking around at universities, and the University of Sydney had a really good marine science program, and the more I read about the University of Sydney, its rankings, its graduate employability, it really sold itself to me. And I could really, when I visited the campus, I could really see myself studying there. So there are a few reasons why I chose the University of Sydney, but I could go on, but I'll leave it there. But I felt really inspired by visiting the campus, and I felt like I could develop a really strong community of friends there and use that as a platform to go on with my future career.
My reason was quite different. I had some very specific questions that I wanted answered, and I couldn't do the research to find those answers because the research hadn't been done. And I decided to do a master's by research and find out answers as to what was happening with income levels for students who chose to come and study here from other countries, so that when I'm speaking to students, I know that what I'm saying to them is true because I've done the empirical research myself. And it was also good for me to take myself to the next level of study in a formal research condition. So I was pleased that I did that, so that I could A, be an alum of the university, but also answer some very real questions that I had about what I do in my day-to-day life. But all of your reasons will be different and unique to you, be very different probably from either Sean or myself, but we're hoping that you can find out a little bit more about what you want to do through this presentation. Let's go.
Okay, so it's not just the University of Sydney you've got to expect to move into. You're also looking at coming to Sydney, the city itself. And that's not necessarily a bad thing either. We're one of the most friendly and livable cities in the world. I think we're in the top 10 livable cities. And that's an index that looks at things like our education system, our health system, the fun things to do around the city, as well as our ease of access and transport. So we really punch above our weight, I think, in terms of what we can offer tourists as well as students. So you are a tourist when you come and study for a little bit until you get the hang of it. But we also we're very diverse as well. I think that's one of the key things about Australia and the way that Australia as a nation developed. We welcome people from all over the world. And I'd say Sydney is incredibly diverse. The University of Sydney is probably more diverse as well. We're about 30 to 40% international students, our student population. So you're really meeting students from all over. You're meeting students from the Americas, Europe, Asia, really everywhere as well. Do you have anything to add on that, Chris?
It is a safe place as well. This something we take for granted here in Sydney is that you can basically have the whole place to yourself. You're not going to be worried about personal safety up beyond what you would hopefully be expected to do in any major city in the world. And the wonderful thing about doing a degree in Australia overall is the federal government says at the end of your degree, you're probably going to get 2 years of work rights, as long as the degree is more than 2 years in duration and you finish it all correctly and so forth. There are rules for it, but that option of taking on the city and the country, not just for study, but even further into your life, if you wanted to do that. So there's enormous opportunity here.
I might just take the opportunity to answer one of these questions that have come through the chat. That's great that you're using the chat as well. Please use that at any point during the session. There's a question come in. Can you talk about the part-time opportunities in Sydney and how is Sydney better than Melbourne? That's very
that's a whole presentation in itself.
Yeah, please join the Sydney versus Melbourne webinar. Just kidding. I would say that's totally up to you. I recommend if you are considering Australia as an option as well, Sydney and Melbourne are some great options for you. You've got to go and visit the cities. You've got to visit the campus and work out which is right for you. I can talk about the reasons that I really love Sydney. I haven't spent that much time at Melbourne University.
I might jump in there for a couple of those. The first part of the question is part-time opportunities. I'm assuming you're asking about part-time work. Most students, domestic or international, have a part-time job. Because we're right next to the CBD, most students will look at retail or hospitality because those jobs will offer you flexible working hours. We have a proper minimum wage in Australia, so even if you're slinging coffees at the local cafe, you're probably earning $20 an hour. You're on a student visa, you're allowed to work 20 hours a week for term time. Once you get into holidays, go nuts, work as much as you like. And you don't have to work in Sydney. Some students choose to travel and work as well, which is an opportunity available to you. How is Sydney better than Melbourne? Look, I love both cities. I'm going to be honest with you. When they have the sales on cheap flights, my wife and I will occasionally make a dash down to Melbourne. We have plenty of friends down there. Sydney's beauty is in the geography of it and the harbour and getting around, and the architecture tries to keep up. Melbourne, the beauty is in the architecture, in the urban life, the coffee houses. Melbourne is very proud of saying that Starbucks failed in Melbourne because people in Melbourne refuse to drink their coffee. And that's interesting, and I think it highlights what Melbourne is like as opposed to Sydney. Both of them are great cities. Honestly, if someone said to me, you have to go and live in Melbourne for a year, I'd say, okay, it's not that bad. But as a proud Sydney-sider, I've got to say I prefer you come to Sydney.
That's right. And just to add on to the geography there, I'm obviously coming from a marine biology background. I love going out and being able to jump in the water around Sydney. You've got some of the most beautiful ecosystems out there. And that was a really sort of a large selling point for me. I went outside and it's not freezing. Sydney is a little bit warmer than Melbourne, and I think that was to my advantage as well.
All right, moving on.
Okay, so this is just a really nice photo of the Sydney Harbour there. And we can use this opportunity to point out our various different campuses around Sydney. If you just follow my pointer here, my mouse pointer, we've got a few campuses. Camperdown and Darlington, this is where the majority of our students come to study. This campus, we have about 70,000 students in total. I'd say we have about 20 to 30,000 students at any given time studying at Camperdown and Darlington. This would host most of our degrees. And I'll just go through a couple of the others here that specialise in different areas. So the Conservatorium of Music, music degrees are studied here. The Camperdown and Darlington campus is beautiful. This is stunning. This is right on the harbour. You're right next to the Botanic Gardens. You're really in an amazing spot to go out and practice in the park and just be a part of this really vibrant musical community out there. Surrey Hills is our dental clinic, our CBD, that's where the MBA is taught as well. Our research farms, so our agricultural and veterinary research farms are out there. Camden, if you're doing the Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, you will be expected to go out to Camden and study there as well. And that's where you do your large animal practice. Cumberland is our health sciences district at the moment. In 2020 and 2021, all the health science students will be moving from Cumberland onto main campus into a new purpose-built building. Rozelle, again, likewise, moving on to main campus over the next couple of years. That's our fine arts school, where the Bachelor of Visual Arts is taught, as well as, I think, the Master of Moving Image. And there's various other ones here, research farms as well, and research stations. And we also have Westmead Hospital as well. So that's another one of our teaching hospitals.
Jump in there with a question for you, Sean. How safe is campus for a female student in the city of Sydney from Zagrati? You've got sisters who studied here, don't you?
I do, yeah. I do have to start answering this question by, like, my experience would be totally different to a female student just going anywhere throughout life. I know that it is very different. The struggles that you face are very different. But I'd like to speak sort of about the opinions of my little sisters. So I've got younger sisters, they're twins. They're both in their second year at the University of Sydney. Caitlin is doing a Bachelor of Commerce and Law, and Bridie's doing a Bachelor of International and Global Studies. I think overall, they take the same precautions they do when they go anywhere. So they try and avoid doing things late at night by themselves, but I think overall they do feel quite safe on campus. This is quite a nice area of Sydney. And there are options as well. So they often talk to me about how they utilise campus security on campus as well. If they do feel unsafe on campus, they can call a number that they've got in their phone, and a campus security representative will be there in a couple of minutes, and they can offer services like walking home. If you live close by to the campus, they'll drive you, or they can walk you home just so that you feel safe. There's also shuttle buses that run almost hourly from the main campus to the nearest train station as well. So if you don't want to do that walk and you would like a lift, then you can do that as well. And that's something that a lot of students take advantage of. So again, I'm limited in my opinion about how I've gone about. I feel very safe on campus as well. I've never had any issues with anyone coming on to campus or being unsafe.
Would you read the next question?
For sure. Do medical students live off campus? Are there 4 seasons in Sydney? Does it thunderstorm?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Thanks, Melanie. Medical students can choose to live, or any student can choose to live on or off campus. You're probably thinking of the American system where you must live on campus for your first year or particular degree. That's not the way here. If you want to live on campus, live on campus. If you want to live off campus, live off campus. I don't know what the split would be with the medical students, but I think it would be fairly similar to most of the students. And I suppose, I know most students do live off campus, but there's plenty of opportunity to live on campus if you wish. Are there 4 seasons? There are, but they're very gentle in the way they change. It's not like you have snow and then you have a very big change in the weather. The seasons very gently change from one into the other, and we do get a proper hot summer. So be prepared for that. It does get proper warm. Does it thunderstorm? It does. One of my favourite things to do in the whole world is to go down to DY Beach, and there's a bluff that looks out over the Pacific Ocean, and to watch a thunderstorm roll in off the Pacific Ocean. It is magical. It's not something you do as a tourist because you've got to time it so that you're there during the thunderstorm. But if you are here as a student living here, if you do hear about the thunderstorms rolling in, it's quite beautiful to go down and watch them roll in over the ocean. They come in off the Pacific Ocean, obviously. The next question, how far away from the University of Sydney is it possible to find affordable accommodation? How effective is public transportation? Thanks for the question, Carlos.
I might take it from you there, Chris. I actually lived on campus for 2 years before I moved off with friends, and I think that's a pretty standard way for students to get a feel for the campus and find the best place to live. I think the advantages of moving on campus initially are really great. You don't have to worry about public transport getting onto campus. You can make your lectures on time. Everything is really easy and accessible. And you can also use that time to build up a really solid friend network. After about 2 years, I found that I was really craving a bit of separation between my university life and just my personal life. So with a couple of friends, I moved out into a share house in a really lovely area around Sydney. So I extended my commute from being like where I could roll out of bed at 9 a.m. and still make my 9 a.m. lecture. That was a really big perk. And then I went to having to catch about a 15-minute, 20-minute bus. So I think that's the standard way to do it, but you can do what you want. You can do as you choose. There's no requirement to live on campus. You can live on campus for your entire degree if you choose as well. It's just totally up to you. And I like having that freedom as well.
Later in the presentation, will be more information on costing.
Exactly.
So we'll get to that.
For sure.
So keep going through.
I will go. And just to note, to add on to your question of public transport, Carlos, we are really well positioned close to the CBD in Sydney. You're about a 10-15 minute walk from Central Station. And that is really the heart of the economics, sort of the powerhouse of Australia. Sydney is home to hundreds of different companies, international companies that work out of the CBD in campus, in Sydney, sorry. And CBD, if you're wondering, that's the equivalent of downtown. You can see we've got access to a lot of bus stations that go through and around campus as well. So this is our campus in red here. And you're really close to Redfern Station as well. So if you're living in towards the inner west, or if you want to go down into the city, you can jump on a train and then do that quite easily. You're also very close to some of the best sort of eateries around Sydney, or some of the best anyway. Glebe, Forest Lodge and Newtown, these are excellent areas for cafes, restaurants, and they have really good nightlife as well. So we don't often use the term student town in Australia, but just from my experience talking with students, they often expect a university to be associated with a university town or a student town. Newtown is probably that equivalent. There are constantly students going up for lunch or going after class for a drink or just to hang out. And that's really amazing. I've got some photos later in the presentation for you there as well.
Keep going.
All right, moving on. And I'll leave this to Chris. Chris is a bit of a history buff about the university.
So it is interesting. A lot of students will even graduate without knowing a lot of this history, but it's there if you want to do it. There's actually a club or society that looks at the history of the university. It is the oldest in Australia. It was established before Australia even became a country. And it is Oxford, a model on Oxford and Cambridge. And if you get bored, you can have a close look at our logo and pick out the different parts of the logo that are associated with those universities. I'm not a big fan of rankings. I think they're a lot of rubbish for the most part, but it's nice that the University of Sydney is regularly ranked very highly. We have a difficulty in that we are such a broad university. We teach so many different subjects, and we have to be ranked high in all of those to maintain a decent ranking, and that's really challenging. But we do it, and we do it extremely well. And please note that when you apply here, it's based on academic merit. And we want to get the best students in here, and that's our primary goal. We're a big university, and we want to be an elite, but not an elitist university. We want our students to be studying with the brightest minds across a whole range of different disciplines. The cross-pollination of those ideas and those areas of study is one of the things that makes the University of Sydney a really special place. Yeah, lovely old picture. It doesn't, the building still looks like that, but nothing else does. It's all changed in front of there. But it's nice to know that you're going to a place that has that history. It has that, provenance, that it is a place of higher learning and has been for such a long time. And we don't rest on those laurels. I like to say that we're not only the oldest university, but if you look at how many wonderful new purpose-built buildings are on campus, I think we could claim we're also the newest university in Australia as well. When you're coming to study nursing, when you're coming to study health sciences, when you're coming to study engineering, I mean, there's construction going on behind us as we speak, you know that the facilities are cutting edge and that you're going to be able to do study and or research in the newest university in Australia.
Moving on. All right, so back in those photos, those older photos, when we initially started out as a university, we had around 9 professors and about 20 or 30 students, and that was it. We all fit into the one building. Now we've grown over the past 150 years. We're up to about 70,000 students and about almost 10,000 professional academic staff. So we are quite a lot larger than we were all those years ago, and we're a lot more international as well. So again, I was talking before, we have over about 145 nationalities joining us here to study. So these are potential classmates of yours. If you're looking at really broadening your experiences, broadening your perspective of the world, this is amazing. You can just sort of turn to your classmate and then find someone from a completely different background that has completely different insight about the world. And that's, I think, really beneficial as part of an education, in addition to your training. In terms of who we studied here, Chris often notes that student politics is a contact sport on campus. Student politics is incredibly rich on campus, and you can see we've taught 7 prime ministers. So prime ministers studying here going on to be elected as the Prime Minister of Australia. And you can see a bunch of other sort of distinguished graduates and alumni of the University of Sydney there. 150 Olympians. I will talk about sport and fitness a little bit later and our distinguished sporting clubs.
Sure, we've had a very nice question come through. I'm really, really appreciative. Thank you, Francis. Francis is asking, how much do the wildfires, or what we call bushfires, affect students living close to the Camperdown campus? And thank you for being so supportive of us. It is a tough time for a lot of people in Australia at the moment. How does it affect students here on or near campus?
At the moment, I think just partly with the air quality, I think that's the only sort of concern that people have. If you're asthmatic and you go outside, it is a little bit smoky at the moment. It was quite smoky the other day. This does change every day with the weather conditions. We had a southerly wind come through and it brought a lot of that smoke away. In terms of the proximity of the fires, they really have been to the north of Sydney. The Central Coast and North Coast of New South Wales have really been hit hard with these bushfires. Around Sydney, a lot of the area is built up, so you don't have a lot of the bushlands nearby. Some fires had popped up, but they were really taken care of quite quickly. So the threat of a bushfire on campus, I'd say, is very, very low. The biggest concern, I think, for people is for the asthmatics, the ones that struggle with the air quality.
But I hope that you as students, and I know that our academics here are looking at climate change. We do get bushfires in Australia every year anyway. This is simply part of our natural ecosystem here in Australia, but we are concerned with the increasing frequency and ferocity of these fires. We are seeing the impacts of climate change. And if you are one of those students who are looking to study in that area, I can only encourage you to come here. There are people here who are looking at those questions, and I hope that the University of Sydney is going to be a leader in the changes that we need to make as a society and as a species to make sure that climate change is not as severe an impact as it could possibly be. So good on you guys. Thanks for the question. I really appreciate that. It's very kind.
Thank you, Francis.
Next.
We'll move on. Chris noted before, we are one of our sort of I get asked a lot, what is your main strength, or what are you most known for? We really do teach almost everything here at the University of Sydney, and we do it well. We don't really lack in any area. We just excel in some really above the sort of the national expectation as well. So these are a few. I'll let you read through a couple of these here. And I'll get on to show you some of the rankings as well. So these are all subject areas that are ranked in the top 50 by the QS World University Rankings. So as you can see, there are tons of different study areas that you can be involved in. And these are all ranked quite highly throughout the world. So these are out of about 22,000 universities in the world. We are really punching above our weight here in Australia. And you can see some of these here. So 4th in the world for health sciences, veterinary science as well. I think that's 9th in the world here. I think you're guaranteed, no matter what you study at the University of Sydney, you are equipped to go on and do really great things in the future.
I remember doing my studies here and reading some of the research articles that were really key to my area of understanding. Walking out of my office where I was studying and looking across the hallway and seeing the name of the person of the article that I had just read. You're meeting people here on a regular basis who are thought leaders in their area. And you might not even know. You brush past someone in an elevator and then find out later that that person is a world expert in their area. And a lot of these people, unlike a lot of universities, are very open to speaking to students. We have opportunities of meeting and talking to these leading luminaries in these areas, and that's quite exciting. So it's not just a number on a table, it's also the opportunity to meet these people and hear them speak.
Mm. Okay, I will point out that just some of the calendar differences between a lot of the Northern Hemisphere students that we speak to a lot of the time. Our seasons are the right way around in the Southern Hemisphere. We have winter in July and summer over January and February and December. So we have a hot Christmas here in Australia. That's all I know. I've never had a white Christmas, so I look forward to doing that in the future. But this is just to give you an idea of the different cohorts that we have, student cohorts. We have 2 semesters, semester 1 and semester 2. Usually applications close around a month out of the commencement date. So commencing in late February, applications will close in January, and for August, when we commence in August, the applications will close in July. A question we had in the last webinar we just did, when is a good idea to move to Sydney and get prepared for studying? And we sort of give a rough estimate of 4 weeks, so about a month ahead of time. That gets you settled in, finding a place to live. If you don't like the place to live, you can move. You've got a bit of a buffer there to find your feet and get set up to study. What is a pretty demanding course, I'm sure. A lot of these courses are demanding and you need to have everything else sorted going forward.
Right.
All right, this is just a little overview of what there is to be a part of at the University of Sydney, but I will go into this in a little bit more depth later. So just to summarise, we've got around 70,000 students, not on the one campus, but dispersed and often studying overseas. Over 200 student clubs and societies. These are academic and social clubs that are really great to be a part of, to not only sort of build up your networks, your skill sets, and sort of get in touch with industry, but you can make a lot of friends here. And these are friends that will end up in completely different areas to potentially what you do in a career. These are really friends for life that you make here as well. And sport and fitness, I'll touch on that a little bit later because that's a big focus for me as well. Just go back. There it is. All right. This is one of our the rankings that we're proudest of. We're first in Australia and 4th in the world for graduate employability. I think we've just picked Harvard as well at number 5. This ranking basically looks at the likelihood of a graduate going on to find a job in the area that they've studied in, I think within the first couple of months after they graduate. So compared with a lot of the other universities, the reputable universities, we actually do really well in this regard.
And, you know, of course, we want to highlight the fact that we do excellent teaching, but that doesn't help you if you can't get a job at the end of it. So employment has to be factored into what you're doing. The economy here in Australia is continuing to bubble along very nicely. We're the only OECD country not to go into negative territory through the Asia financial crisis and the global financial crisis. So we have a small, highly educated, highly mobile workforce here in Australia, and that reflects in your ability to be able to either get a job when you go home, or if you chose to stay on here in Sydney or look for employment as well. So we're extremely proud of that.
That's right. And I get asked a lot, is this just an Australian university? Am I limited to just working in Australia once I finish studying at the University of Sydney? And I'd say definitely not. You've seen how many international students we have here. They're not all staying and working in Australia for the rest of their lives. They're going on to do really amazing things in other countries as well. And we wouldn't be 4th in the world for graduate employability if we were just educating students to be stuck here in Australia either. All right, so that was a long introduction actually, but we hope that's provided a bit of an overview of what you can expect to study in Australia. We're actually going into the broad part of the presentation. We've taken a little bit longer, so we might just flick through a few of these.
If you do have those questions, put them through and we're happy to answer questions as we go. Go for it.
Didn't put your name on there, Chris, but yeah, my name is Sean.
I'm secondary. I'm just Chris here supporting Sean.
So my name's Sean. I'm a recruitment assistant at the University of Sydney. I work predominantly in the North American team, so I travel to the US and Canada to recruit students and speak to students in high schools, at colleges, at universities as well. And Chris does a lot of the same work, so we work together as a small team here at the uni. My background is a Bachelor of Science with a marine science major. I grew up on the coast, even though it was quite regional and rural. I grew up on a property. I was really close to the beach, and that's sort of been a big passion of mine, going out and diving, fishing, surfing, all that kind of stuff. I really wanted to be able to build a career with that not too far away. And I think the University of Sydney, when I was looking, really offered a really good option for me to study here. And I'll get into what I've done a little bit later as well, if we've got time. Okay, so just the undergraduate admissions, I will touch briefly on the admissions process before I jump into the rest of the cool things you can do around Sydney. We place a really large emphasis on academic qualifications. There's less of an emphasis on reference letters or personal statements. That's not to say that those supporting documents aren't useful. You can definitely use them for scholarships and for some of the accommodation as well. I will point out that accommodation applications and a lot of our scholarship applications, they're completely separate to your course application. They aren't bundled into one. So usually students will get an offer to study first and then go off and apply for scholarships and accommodation as well. For a lot of our undergraduate students, all you need is just an IB diploma, an SAT, ACT, or another recognised qualification as well. If you're looking at the whole, if you want to look at the whole list, our international guide, if you just type into Google, University of Sydney International Guide 2020, on one of the pages in there that will have all of our recognised qualifications and the corresponding requirements for our courses. So you don't just apply to the University of Sydney in general, you apply to the course. So in my case, I applied for the Bachelor of Science and I needed a specific requirement to get into the Bachelor of Science as well. If you're coming from a background where English isn't your first language, you might have to take an English proficiency test. And you can find out the requirements there, again, by looking at the course pages on our website. We don't have just a blanket score that you need to meet. And of course, some of our courses, such as music, architecture, visual arts, we really want you to showcase your broad range of skills there. So you might require to be, to do an audition, submit a portfolio, or attend an interview. Postgraduate coursework, it's actually quite simple. You just go and, again, find the course page, look at the requirement there. It's usually a GPA requirement in a bachelor's degree that you've done. And usually the minimum is 65%, or what we call in Australia a credit average. For a lot of the programs, when places become competitive, this minimum might be escalated depending on the quality of all the applicants. So usually I suggest students to have a little bit higher than that, but certainly for a lot of our courses, that's all you're required to have. Okay, in postgraduate research, this is a little bit more of a lengthy process because that just involves finding a supervisor, finding the right kind of project that you're happy to work on and for the supervisor to support you with. So first of all, you're best suited if you have some research experience. If you're going into a PhD, it's usually expected that you have an honours degree or you have a master's program with a bit of research in it as well before you get started on a PhD. You can use what we call the Research Supervisor Connect. So you can search for the current projects that are happening at the University of Sydney and then look to see who is heading those projects, who is the project supervisors. Get in touch with those supervisors and submit a proposal. So see what kind of projects you can be on. Really answer those questions that you're interested in discovering. And then submit an application, and there are 4 research periods that you can join the university in as well: January, March, July, and October. Okay.
So I don't think there'll be many students here who would need CET, but if you're looking for someone else whose English proficiency needs to be improved, we have our own, essentially our own English language score here. We also have the University of Sydney Foundation program as well. So if your qualifications or your English are not to the level that they need to be, you can do those studies with us here as well. We'll move on.
Okay, and again, I touched on this briefly before, but application closing dates usually, and I say usually because some of our courses, such as the veterinary medicine course or the like postgraduate courses, they often have a different timetable to the other courses. But you can usually expect to submit an application a month out and still be accepted into the course.
But please make sure you submit a complete application. Things get held up completely if you don't get all your documentation. So make sure that's all done. And our team here in the admissions team, I know they're the best in Australia. I travel regularly around the world. I speak to colleagues at other universities, and they are envious of the speed, efficiency, and accuracy that we have in our application process. It's all done online. It's you'll be surprised how easy it is.
We've just had a question coming from Hannah. Is the campus a closed campus? And do you need an ID to get onto campus? It's not a closed campus, it's completely open. So members of the public are free to come and tour the university and make use of our public libraries. A lot of the buildings will have restricted card access. So if you're working on a project that you require a laboratory for, you often need a student card or a staff card to be able to get into those spaces.
We're very proud of it being an open campus. We literally have busloads of high school students come through all the time. We have a wonderful museum on campus. We're building a new, even better one that will be available for you guys to have a look at in a couple of years' time. There are sporting activities going on all the time. We love being an open campus. We love being a part of the open community of the city of Sydney. So what we enjoy is that you can be a student on campus and have everything available to you on campus, but the whole of the city of Sydney is open to you as well, because we're right down near the city centre, as Sean has mentioned. You don't need an ID to get on campus, but as Sean mentioned, there'll be some times that you'll need an ID to get into certain buildings.
And once again, if your question is sort of more getting an idea of the safety on campus as well, we have an extensive campus security team that are constantly driving around in their cars, and they have numbers that you can call immediately if you feel unsafe. Generally, I'd say that's not the case. I went through 4 years of a degree without any problems, but I've had friends of mine that feel a little bit unsafe if they're studying late at night. They've called campus security, and they're usually very, very helpful. All right, just some important terms that we use here in Australia. I'm sure you've heard of Australian slang, and this is just sort of the starting point of that, and you'll get into some of the trickier stuff later on. So welcome week, this is a week before classes begin in semester 1. There's a welcome day ahead of semester 2. This is a great opportunity to go around campus, meet all of the students that are just commencing their classes. You can join a club or society and start building your friend network, and you can attend one of the social activities run by the USU. So these are often things like debates, or there might be an exhibition Quidditch game run by our Quidditch club. I think they also have live bands playing as well, so student bands playing. It's really a lot of fun. And that's usually the day you see the most students on campus. Yeah, I'd say so. Census date. So if you enroll into a unit of study and you're not completely set on it and you have the room within your degree to move to another one, you can get a taste of it. You can try it out and then move without penalty if you do so before week 4 of semester. That's a really good chance for you. It's just sort of a safety net a little bit almost. If you really find that the unit of study you've enrolled in is not for you, you can move out of that without penalty in that time. Mid-semester break, each of our 2 semesters, they're 13 weeks long. You have a 1-week break in the middle of that. That's awesome for catching up on assignments if you've got those building up in the background, or catching up on lectures if you've missed. Most of our lectures are recorded, I'll just point out. And also STUVAC, you've got a 1-week break at the end of your 13-week semester before we go into a 2-week exam period. All right, working in Australia, I think we did sort of touch on this before when Chris answered a part-time question, so I won't spend too much time on this. Basically, your student visa will allow you to work on or off campus. The minimum wage in Australia is pretty nice compared to a lot of countries in the rest of the world. You can work 20 hours per week during semester and 40 hours per week in the university breaks. Student visa process. This is pretty straightforward. I might let you read through some of this while I just sort of talk over the top of it. once you get an application, you basically accept your offer, pay your fees, get an electronic confirmation of enrolment, and then use that to go to the Australian Department of Home Affairs and then apply for a student visa. The process time for the Australian Department of Home Affairs and applying for a visa differs depending on the country you're coming from or your individual circumstances. Usually they're pretty fast, but I just generally recommend any international student to apply well ahead of when you plan to commence at the University of Sydney. That'll just give you the best chance. If something does go wrong in that process, again, we aren't responsible for that process, but I just like to say, you give yourself a bit of a safety net by applying early.
We've had a question come in from Eva Sean. Is it true there are a lot of dangerous animals around?
I guess I'm a bit biased. I grew up in quite a regional town, so there were quite a lot of snakes and spiders around where I grew up. There are some spiders around Sydney, particularly in the warmer months, but they're here to eat the bugs. They're here to eat the other bugs that you don't like as well. So we usually treat them with a fair bit of respect here in Australia. You're usually pretty safe. I'd say that if you're influenced by movies such as Crocodile Dundee, that's all up in the north of Australia in the tropics. You don't really have to worry about crocodiles swimming down rivers here in Australia.
Okay. And would you read the next question?
Is there any accommodation available for higher degree research candidates within or nearby campus?
We have specific accommodation for graduate students. So Sancta Sophia, there's a graduate house, and also we have University of Sydney Village, which is heavily graduate students as well. The lifestyles of different students are a little bit different. The undergraduate students are perhaps more social. The graduate students are a lot more focused on their studies and maybe a little less social. So the answer is yes. We've actually got more than that though. There's a range of accommodation options. And please have a look at our website or contact one of the staff here. We'd be happy to go through the different options for you, but there are specific accommodation options for higher degree research students. Sorry, Sean, continue.
No, that's all right. And we will get into some of the options for accommodation in a little bit. We had a question from Enoch, I think before, just looking at a rough cost of everything a student would be expected to pay. Depending on the course you apply for, the cost will differ. So for courses such as the veterinary medicine course, that's really demanding in terms of staff, materials and equipment that you need to learn. You can expect to pay a little bit more than what you see here. And that's compared to a Bachelor of Arts, for instance, where the materials you need, you don't really have labs in the Bachelor of Arts, so that's a little bit cheaper as well. We've chosen as an example here, Bachelor of Science. This is a pretty middle of the road course in terms of cost. This is around, you're looking at a rough comparison here. I think the Australian dollar has even fallen further compared to the US dollar when this was done up, this comparison. But if you are coming from the US, you can enjoy your 30% discount.
All places on sale.
Yeah, that's right. So you've got tuition fees at around $45,000. Overseas student health cover. This is mandatory that you get this. So when you do come over, you get sick or you're injured, you're covered by insurance. Services and amenities fees, so that looks after things like the facilities on campus, such as toilets, and the cleaning and the maintenance of campus as well. Any textbooks, it's good to leave a bit of room for study materials such as that. Living expenses, and this includes accommodation and residence, and any flight costs as well. So your total per year would be around 80,000 US, and this totally depends on you. Like you have a lot of flexibility around accommodation and choosing a place that could actually cost a lot less than 30,000 a year as well.
Just had a question coming from Miguel. How cold is Sydney in the winter, Sean?
Depends on what your frame of reference is, I guess. I don't find it that cold myself. I think it gets down to about 10 degrees Celsius in the winter, and that would be a really cold day. And that would be the minimum. I think during the middle of the day, you'd get up to about 15 degrees. I think the average in winter would be about 17 or 18 degrees Celsius. In summer, you're looking at about maybe 25 to 30 degrees Celsius average in summer. So it's quite moderate. The changes in weather are really gradual as well. So I don't think you'd have too much to worry about. It's not like, say, for New York example, in the winter, that would be freezing. It doesn't snow. It's never snowed in Sydney, I think, apart from maybe the outskirts.
Would you read the next question from
Mhm.
Ashkash?
That's Pash. Are there teaching opportunities after completing master's programs in the university?
There are some students do go on to teach. There can be, particularly for PhD candidates, opportunities to take tutorials and help with the teaching and research opportunities at the University of Sydney. Again, don't confine yourself to on campus. Remember, if this is an Australian federal government rule, not the University of Sydney rule, but if you complete a degree of 2 years duration or greater and complete it successfully, you can apply for a work visa for 2 years. So the short answer is yes, but please don't limit yourself to just on campus. The whole of the city and the whole of the country are open to you. Another question has come through, Sean, from a chap by the name of Matthew. He lived here in the early 2000s. Has the city of Sydney changed much since then? Because this is your frame of reference.
I would say I really only moved to Sydney when I was about 17 or 18, just before I started my degree. I had visited a little bit. I was only born in 97, so I wouldn't really remember that much. So I guess it's grown.
It has. The answer is yes and no. The vibe of being in Sydney is still the way it has always been. And that's nice. It's a busy city. It's a multicultural city. There's always something going on. I think it's sophisticated a lot. It's become more sophisticated. We've become even more internationalized than then. People sometimes ask, what's Australian cuisine? And my answer is always, well, what do you want it to be tonight? You've got the opportunity to sample cultures of foods and find ingredients for cooking for almost any type of food you want in the world. The number of festivals has increased, the number of opportunities to engage in different cultural activities has increased. So the answer to your question, Matthew, is yes and no. So I think we've held a lot of what it is to be Sydney, and that's still the same as what it is, but we've changed and developed to become a truly global city. Now, the next question's come through. Would you read that one?
Yeah, what's the culture of the graduate programs? Natalie asked, do the students from different disciplines have opportunities to meet?
There's a society for graduate students and there's a society for research students as well. And I was part of that and I joined a couple of the activities. But I'm going to be honest with you, students are very focused on their studies here, particularly the graduate students and particularly the research students. It can be a little bit isolating, so I do encourage you to join those opportunities when they arise. All of those opportunities are there, but it's up to you to go out and partake of them. So they are there, but the nature of the beast of a high degree of our research, in particular a research degree, is such that that will dominate most of your thoughts and your times, and you'll probably have a small number of students who are studying in a similar area to you that you'll end up spending a lot of time with, but those broader social activities are always available in campus and in the city. The next question comes through is, can you talk a little about non-educational facilities on and off campuses such as health clubs? Oh, this is a good one.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, well, I'll get into that in a little bit. I might just put a pin in that, Fahid, and then I'll get into that later.
We will talk about it.
We will.
All right, things to do in Sydney is basically what we're starting off now.
Yeah, that's right. So in Sydney, you're really close. When we showed that map at the start of the presentation, you're really close to a lot of the iconic Australian landmarks, such as the Sydney Harbour Bridge, Sydney Opera House, Bondi Beach. You're only about a 30-minute bus ride for all of these things at a maximum. So when I moved to Sydney initially, I really wanted to do all of those touristy things, going and seeing Sydney Harbour, going to museums around Circular Quay and Darling Harbour. And as I sort of progressed and I got more interested in marine science, I really liked going out and going to the Royal National Parks and going spearfishing and scuba diving off the coasts there. So you can go on bushwalks and really decide to do whatever you would like around there as well. The public transport system is such in Sydney where you can really get around cheaply and quickly. It's quite extensive and comprehensive. Okay. These are some of the little locations around Sydney, that the university itself that you can get to. Broadway Shopping Centre. If you're cooking your own food, this is really great to go and just do all your shopping in one go. There's a Kmart in this centre as well. Victoria Park. This is awesome if you just want to take a little bit of a break during the middle of the day. It's a 3-minute walk. You can go outside and lie down in this really nice park with your mates and just hang out. Bondi Beach. I really recommend making a day of this. It's really great to just catch a bus and hang out on the beach all day. It is one of the most famous beaches in Australia.
In the world.
In the world, I'd say as well. You might have heard of Bondi Rescue, which is pretty popular, I've heard. And again, the equivalent of our student town, Newtown, it's really popular with students. Everyone comes up for lunch and just general dining and nights out as well. So it's really good to look at. Getting around, all you need is just an Opal card.
Please don't drive.
I actually sold my car before moving to Sydney. I had a car to get around in where I grew up because there was no public transport. It was just going to be too expensive to maintain and look after and pay registration on, and I really did not need it. That's the key point there. I was able to get around either by walking. I lived on campus, so I was a walking distance from most locations. And where I needed to get around a bit further, I just got an Opal card. You top it up as though you top it up with some money, and then you tap on, tap off to get around. So buses, trains and ferries.
They've also developed in the sense that you can get a credit card now to act as your Opal card. Actual need for an Opal card is reducing. So we're developing and becoming, again, more sophisticated, but you can still get around. And again, please don't drive, particularly the first year that you're here. Get to learn the city. The public transport is good. Sydney-siders complain about it all the time, but it's not nearly as bad as any of the Sydney-siders have told you it is. They just like complaining. It's a great system.
Yeah, too jaded.
Yeah.
That's one of the ferries in the background. So really you only pay $3 or $4 and you can catch this ferry from Circular Quay near Sydney Harbour, Sydney Opera House, excuse me, and then go to places like Manly or Balmain, and you really just get a really cheap tour of Sydney Harbour. It's really great for the Instagram.
It is. Clubs and societies. I'm fond of saying if you're bored on campus, that's your fault. There's over 200 clubs and societies, and what I also love is that if you can get, I think it's 20 friends together who are all members of the student union, you can start a new club. So if you find within that 200 clubs there is nothing of interest to you, start your own club and get your friends to join you.
That's right. I've got an older brother that has just finished a veterinary medicine degree as well. He thought there was a need for a heavy metal music society. So he went and found 20 other like-minded metalheads and then joined that society. So it's definitely possible. You can get a bit of money from the University of Sydney Union to put on events and create that community. Again, we've touched on this as well. A lot of these are academic clubs. So I joined the Science Society when I came to university. Other ones, the Law Society, these are really designed to put you in touch with future careers, industry, different companies that are looking to hire at the moment as well.
I'm going to jump in there. I've got a couple of questions. Do postgraduate students get transport discounts? And this is something that drives me nuts. We as the University of Sydney have spoken to the New South Wales State Government on a number of occasions about this, asking for international students to be able to get a student discount. And so far the answer has always been no. And I do apologise for that. I find it frustrating as well. The university has supported efforts to give international students the full discount as a student for the city and the state. The New South Wales State Government, annoyingly, has not agreed with us. So it's an ongoing battle, and we hope that one day we might win, but so far we haven't been successful. Someone's asked about bikes.
So that's a good point, actually.
Yeah.
If you are worried about spending too much on public transport, I actually ride to and from the university to work every day. I'd say Sydney, it's a little bit hilly and the roads are kind of quite narrow and they can be a little bit dangerous at times for riding your bike. I'd say compared to some of the cities I've heard, like Amsterdam, where just everyone rides their bikes everywhere, it's really well set up for cyclists. Sydney, you do have to run the risk a bit of riding with transport and traffic, I mean. But it's definitely possible, and that's a really great way of getting around. Just some of the hills will kill you.
But it is improving. The current mayor of Sydney, Clover Moore, who's also a University of Sydney alum, is a great cyclist. And you'll see people with T-shirts saying, "I roll with Clover." And that's wonderful. The city is putting money and effort into developing safer cycle paths. I see people cycling on some of the roads in Sydney and I just think they're nuts. I would never cycle on some of those roads. I believe it's just too dangerous. But cyclists do have the right. But again, we are developing more priority lanes for cyclists and getting them into a safer position to cycle around the city.
That's right. And you see cyclists doing that constantly. So there is demand pushing those new developments through. I've just flicked onto a sport and fitness page. We do have several gyms on campus. So someone was asking about health clubs before. Depending on your budget and what you need, you can go to gyms that just have a weights room and a cardio section, or you can go to one that has an Olympic-sized swimming pool that offers classes like your pumps, your spin classes, bar classes, things like that. You can definitely make use of that. If you're interested in playing some social sport, you can really try some iconic Australian sports as well. So cricket, I guess, is English, but we're really crazy about cricket in Australia. And of course, Australian rules football. We've got about 3 or 4 different types of football here in Australia that we play. So we're very sporty nation.
There's a question about the cost of the sporting facilities.
Yeah, so for students, you do still have to pay, but you do get a heavily discounted rate. They're comparable to the cheapest sort of franchise gym around Sydney. That's Anytime Fitness or Fitness First. And I say that they're really good. It's really nice going to a gym with other students, and you can go with your friends as well. And they're in a great location. They're on campus. So if you've got an hour or 2 hours between classes, you can go to a gym, go and get a workout in, and then feel really refreshed for your next class. All right, moving on to accommodation. I would like to bring something up. I think someone was talking about postgraduate housing and what the postgraduate culture is about. One of the best ways to do that is actually go to a postgraduate house. If you are concerned that you're really going to focus on your studies and you don't have a lot of time to socialise or network, a postgraduate house would be amazing for that. All your peers from different fields within postgraduate disciplines are right there. You would have meals with them, 3 meals a day. There'll be academic dinners. And I'll show you a list as well of links that you can pursue at the end here. We are running towards the end of the time for the webinar, so I will have to, unfortunately, skip through a couple of these slides. But again, send any questions through to the chat and email us as well if you've got any questions. I'll put the email addresses up at the end.
I'll just launch into one last question that's popped up. Shanisha has asked more questions about part-time jobs and so forth. This is a very common thing. There are enormous opportunities. As I mentioned, the university's right by the city centre. Most students get a part-time job. Some work on campus, most work off campus. But the city of Sydney is a busy, dynamic, global city, and there are opportunities coming along all the time. So yes is the short answer to that, and they do have to pay you properly. We do have a proper minimum wage, and there'll be more opportunities than you'll know what to do with. But you do have to go out and do a bit of work to find out where those are and the best one that suits you.
That's right. So I'll just quickly go through some of the accommodation options you've got here. Not all of them are catered. So St. John's College, which is catered, and that's a really great academic and social community you've got there. This is compared to something like a shared house in the Darlington Terraces. You live with other people, you share bathrooms, you share kitchens, and you cook your own food. Similar to Regiment Building, except you have a really big communal kitchen down the bottom. And Urban Nest, which is some of the private accommodation providers that you can go into as well. If you'd like to take a screenshot of our accommodation contacts, or even just type into Google University of Sydney accommodation, you should get taken to the accommodation website. You can look at all our options there. Again, there's no requirement to live on campus. You can move on for 1 or 2 years and then move off as well. And I did have a little bit about my use of experience, but these are just some nice photos you can look at and just sort of see what I was able to do in a marine science degree as part of my degree. So these are some of the subjects I was able to take part in, as well as an honours year as well. This is in the Royal National Park. I won't go too much into this. This is pretty in-depth. There's a nice photo of me freezing myself in the winter doing my honours project. I was snorkeling around Sydney Harbour, looking at fish communities. Anyway.
Where are the contact details, Sean?
Here we go. Contact details.
We haven't been able to answer all of the questions that we've had come through. Some of them are quite specific. Please use these contact details, maybe take a screenshot or just use your phone and forward those questions through to us, and we'll answer them for you. There are another couple of webinars coming along on some different subjects. The one directly after this is on the MBA. What are some of the other webinars that are available, Sean?
Well, here they are as well. So if you're looking at doing postgraduate research, this is on Friday. If you're interested in engineering, if you're interested in hearing from some current students, I know I've just graduated, but their current perspective is really great. And they're coming from countries, I think we've got someone from India, we've got someone from the US coming as well, who's studying an MBA, and one from Europe as well. So that'll be really great to come and listen to their perspective and their journey coming from a different country. Again, we are both Australian, so our perspective is definitely skewed, and this is, in my experience, all I know. So, and there's also a couple on Monday as well.
All right, well, we've reached the end of our time, sadly. We do thank you for making the time to register and join us here today. Again, bring those questions through, and we hope to see you in some of the future webinars as well.
Great. Thanks so much, guys. See you later.